How do I not have judgment towards her and what her motivations were? So it's about trying to understand where these people come from and to understand why this woman had become so vulnerable to go and do what she did.
You know, there is a new buzzword. And I would say buzzword because I am not entirely convinced about its applicability everywhere. But a group of thinkers decided that we will create a term called countering violent extremism online, or countering violent extremism through new narratives, through better storytelling. And of course, people like you, who are natural storytellers, need to be at the forefront of that movement. How would you, as a filmmaker, respond to a plea by, say, a community which says, Anurag, we need to de-radicalize this larger group? Can you not create powerful stories that attract them, that make them think differently, that make them see the situation differently?
You know, it's something that I face almost every time, because the one thing that I face the most is people tell me that your films don't have a positive ending, or they say that you don't have, why do you...
Basically, if you're a gangster, you can be a hero in his movies. Yeah.
No? But my whole thing is like, you know, for years we have been making movies, and Hindi movies have always been about a positive message at the end of it, and message of love, and message of being together. It has not done anything to us. For 50
but why?
years,
You can argue that India has remained largely more peaceful despite all
it
its...
was, but my thing is like, you know, sometimes we need to force people to think. We need not give them answers. We need to leave questions in their heads. And that is more important than having all the answers, because one person's answer is another person's question. Right? So it's very important we evoke something in people, we provoke something in them, and they leave unsatisfied. A satisfied mind is going to go to bed and sleep.
Do you think that brings about change?
I don't know, but for me, that's something that we have not been practicing. I think we need to practice that to know whether it will change or not. Because we've seen the other thing, not all our movies are love stories, and we only teach people to love each other, but do we love each other?
I mean, no, but Anurag, that's true. But a satisfied man goes back and sleep. That's better than unsatisfied mind going to the room on the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay.
Yeah, but I'm saying today's world, I can't shut my eye to things that is going on around and just go to sleep. It is. I can't do that.
Do you not wonder sometimes that because you highlight the angst, sometimes the pain, and maybe because many people now start identifying with it, you actually start, in a way, provoking those people to change their state? And do you think that that dark cinema, as we call it, can sometimes be a basis for actually fueling some of the more basic instincts?
No, it is not that, you know, in the sense, on one side, yes, I always argue that something that's kind of uncomfortable to watch actually has a positive effect. Mm-hmm. It also does have negative effects in very select few. People who are like, you know, already deemed to go there, in the sense there are minds who are like very, very dark and very depraved. You know, they will find inspiration in anything.
Correct.
But I'm saying largely, if you see children, the impressionable minds will find a lot of glamour in a hero jumping off 22nd floors and flying. And a lot of kids saw Shaktiman and tried to be Shaktiman. It was glamorous, it was simple, it was not very complicated. But people tend to emulate that, something that smells of heroism, rather than something that's far more real.
And can I pick up on that? Because that's the tool that ISIS used. They glamorized, they made cool, they made fighting a war cool. You come here, you can have all these women, you can have a better life in the hereafter, you know, and exactly what you've just said about the hero, or the kind of joining a club where you're part of this kind of heroism. That's exactly what ISIS captured.
No, but now let me ask you an institutional question. You see that you're perhaps BBC, and certainly in India we have been fed a lot of BBC fare.
Is that a good thing or?
I mean, again, like Anurag, I won't take a position on this.
Growing up, we said BBC said it means like it's the
means-
truth.
That's right. So you know, BBC is also perhaps the most boring news channel in the world, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest here. You have the largest cadre of reporters in every capital,
Yeah.
and yet I don't think you come up with the number of breaking news that a normal Hindi channel with a
Every
presence in-
9 seconds.
Right, that's
that-
right.
Yeah.
So, as BBC, do you believe in the power of positive storytelling? And do you think there is, I mean, Anurag says no, but let me ask you, do you think positive stories can change the discourse?
I do think that, absolutely. My brief and remit is grim stories. So if someone is leaving a place, I go in. You know, if someone's being killed and everybody else is rushing out, my brief is to enter that place. However, I think it's really important for us to counter those narratives at a time where communities feel targeted. So we spoke today about the attack in Las Vegas, for example. You know, I think it's the role of the media of how we package and sell these messages and how careful we are. So you talk about the BBC failing to break news, for example, but as Anurag said, as soon as we say it, it becomes fact. Now, if we use terms for a white man attacking a group of people as the lone wolf who, you know, maybe have been
Some
radicalized or, yes, has some issues, mental health issues or
Correct.
whatever. But had he been a Middle Eastern man or someone with darker skin, you know, automatically certain media outlets would brand him, you know,
A possible terrorist at
possible
least.
terrorist, yes, suspect at least, or linked to, now the other thing that may be said is he's linked to global jihad in some way, or ISIS claims responsibility. Now we have to see how desperate ISIS has become because they attempted to claim the Las Vegas attack yesterday as well. So I think it's really important to reflect that, you know, there's a community that feels violated and targeted. However, equally, I don't think it's the correct message when people say, not in my name. When an attack happens, community leaders say, well, doesn't represent the whole of the wider community, that they need to come out and show that there are other faces to the community as well.
So, Anurag, how do you do that? If you don't tell positive stories about communities that are stereotyped into certain modes.
No, we need to tell positive stories, but the thing is, see, I'm fighting a different battle. I'm fighting a battle at home. So I'm fighting my battle with the mainstream cinema, where a hero is a hero in every frame. He is a hero before he walks in.
Correct.
Right? In a
Correct.
positive story, the hero has to be by the end of the story.
That's right.
But by the end of the story, he's superhero.
That's
So
right.
I'm fighting that battle.
In his movies, hero is normally dead at the end of it. But you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few questions. Let's open it up. We have 5 minutes. I'm going to pick up a cluster of questions, and I'm going to rely on their memories to try and answer them. So you have to come to the mic. You can't shout from them. So whoever needs to ask questions should walk to the mic. Be brief because I want to bring 2 or 3 people in, and then I'll come back to them. Go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Rahul Tiwari from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. When we, like Sameer's run has started that Dalit man has been killed, brutally beaten to death. So why always we do so? Like we see in newspaper that Dalit man, Muslim man, ultimately man has died. So why
Fair
always
point.
take these notions?
So why do we attach identities and labels to human suffering? Good point. Please ask.
Yeah, I worked on Islamic terrorism. Now, what the typical Islamic terrorist, I'm going to be very politically incorrect here, the typical Islamic terrorist or suicide bomber is someone who's very highly educated, typically has a master's degree, usually an engineer, sometimes a doctor, comes from an upper class family, has international exposure having lived in at least 2 or 3 countries, and really has not had a history of religious fanaticism. Most of the suicide bombers are ones who exhibit moderate religious behavior, and they suddenly come across as discriminated socially, or a sudden sense of discrimination socially.
No, sir, how do you reach that conclusion that most of the bombers?
Yeah.
I've done studies on this, and I can send that across. And really, it takes me about 3 to 4 weeks to turn a moderate Muslim into a suicide bomber or someone
Okay,
who
so
carries out a
got your
terrorist
question.
attack.
His question is that contrary to our notions